Hi everyone, I'm Maya and I'm coming to you from the Green Plate Special Kitchen. Today we are making one of my all-time favorite recipes, which is a Thai red curry. And we are going to be using some of our seasonal fall vegetables from the garden. And let's get started. So as far as our ingredients go today, we're going to use lots of different aromatics. So we've got shallots here, ginger, garlic, an onion, a lime. We've got these really beautiful potatoes from our garden. We've got some fresh beans, a delicata winter squash. This is our Thai red curry paste, which is a mix of red chilies and garlic, some lemongrass. We got cumin, coriander, lime peel, all in this curry paste here. It smells super fragrant. We're gonna add some coconut milk, coconut oil, and fish sauce. If you want to keep this recipe vegetarian, you can leave out the fish sauce. We've also got an assortment of hardy greens from our garden. So we've got some collards, some kale, some Swiss chard. You can use any combination of these types of greens for this recipe. And an option for this recipe is to make your own bowl out of roasting a winter squash. So here I just sliced the top of this kabocha squash off, roasted it in the oven with some olive oil, salt and pepper for about a half hour at 400 degrees. And as you can see now, I can use it as a bowl for serving, and it's also just really nice to be able to eat your soup out of it and be scraping some of that kabocha squash as you're eating your soup. Really tasty. So this recipe comes together really quickly, especially if you do it in this specific order. So we're gonna first chop our shallots, garlic, and ginger, and we're gonna get that going in our soup pot. And then while that's starting to go, then we're gonna start chopping our potatoes and squash. We're gonna add our coconut milk and some water. And while the potatoes and squash are simmering and cooking for a little while, then we'll chop our greens and our green beans. And for this recipe, you can really use any vegetables that you like. I've really enjoyed putting some bell peppers in here, some eggplant in here. You can add fish or chicken. So it's really flexible and easy to make it your own. So a trick that I really like to do for when I peel ginger is to actually use a spoon to peel it. This way I get just this outer part off, and then I keep as much of that ginger as possible. This recipe calls for a few tablespoons of ginger, which usually a tablespoon is about an inch in length of ginger. So I'm gonna get all of this peel off first, and then I'm gonna mince it. We're gonna mince our shallot and our garlic. So first off, you're gonna take the peel off of the cloves of shallot and the cloves of garlic, and then mince them. To start cooking, I would recommend using sort of a shallow soup pot like this one. You're gonna heat it up on about medium heat, and once it's hot, you're gonna add your cooking oil. So you can use coconut oil, which is what I'm gonna use, but you could use any kind of cooking oil: canola, olive oil, vegetable oil, whatever you have lying around. And I'm gonna add a couple tablespoons of coconut oil here. Once our oil is heated up, we are going to add our shallot, garlic, and ginger. You can add it all in one go. For this recipe and any recipe that you're using a curry paste for. In this case, Thai curry paste. You're going to want to add that curry paste at the beginning of the recipe so that it gets heat, releases some of its aromas, and then it can sort of flavor the whole dish throughout your cooking process. So this is heated up nicely, and I'm going to go ahead and add that sizzle sound is what we're looking for here. So you just want to stir all those into the oil. And you want to let these cook on their own until just softened. And you're going to start to smell them too. And that's how you know that it's ready to add your curry paste. I'm going to throw in a 3-fingered pinch, as we call it here at GPS, of salt into my pot there. And now I'm going to go ahead and add my curry paste by the tablespoon. This recipe calls for 4 tablespoons of curry paste. 1, whoop, 2, 3, 4. And I'm just gonna heat up my curry paste here. And at this point you wanna add just a little bit of your coconut milk so that nothing is burning here. And your curry paste can sort of start to come apart and cook a little bit. You might want to turn your heat down to a simmer at this point as well. All right, I'm gonna add just a little bit more of my coconut milk. As this is going, I'm gonna start chopping my potatoes and my winter squash. Do our potatoes first. So I'm gonna cut them in half like this, and you can do as little or as big chunks as you want. Let's see here, I think I'll do something like this. Make sure to always keep your back thumb of your spider fingers, your back leg of your spider behind you like this, so your elbow's gonna come out. Actually, your forearm's gonna be parallel to the edge of your cutting board in the table. That way, your thumb, which is usually, if you keep it like this, kind of in the line of fire here, will stay safe. Okay, and I'm just gonna throw these potatoes right into the pot as I'm cutting them. All right, so I'm stirring all of my 4 about medium-sized potatoes into this curry paste mixture. Next up, I'm gonna add the rest of my 14-ounce can of coconut milk, and I'm gonna add about 2 cups of water so that these potatoes are fully immersed and they can cook nicely. All right, there's one. Here's the second one. You can also use any kind of broth instead of water. You could use vegetable broth, chicken broth, anything that you have on hand, fish broth. Okay, so I'm gonna bring our pot up to a boil and then turn it back down to a simmer. So I'm gonna cover it while I bring up the heat a little bit. That way our potatoes will be able to cook well. I'm gonna use a delicata squash for this recipe, but you could use any winter squash. A delicata, the skin of this squash is, the texture is just fine to eat. But if you're using a squash like a butternut or an acorn, especially for the butternut, you can just use a peeler and peel off the skin and then chop it. But for this delicata, again, I'm just gonna throw it in with the skin on. So I'm gonna cut this delicata in half because it's a little bit hard actually to get through. Now I have a nice flat side, so I'm gonna cut it through lengthwise. And then I'm gonna use a spoon to pull out all of the seeds and the insides, because we don't want that part while we're cooking with it. You can save these seeds and roast them on their own though, and they're super tasty, and they'd be a really nice garnish for this recipe or just to snack on. So once you've got it hollowed out like this, I'm just gonna go ahead and make sure this stem isn't part of our recipe. You can put it on its flat side, and then I'm just gonna cut it into kind of wide strips like that. And then for this recipe, I'm gonna cut these into smaller pieces since I'm gonna be eating it with a spoon. All right. Our soup is brought up to a boil now, so I've turned it down to a simmer, low heat, and I'm gonna place my squash in there as well with the potatoes. These are the vegetables that are gonna take the longest to cook with this recipe. So that's why I'm gonna put them in first. And I'm gonna leave the top on, be partially covered so that these can cook nicely. And we're gonna get going with our other veggies. All right, we are up to our part where you can add lots of different veggies that you like to add. I'm gonna cut some onion and throw it in kind of towards the end so that it's not super cooked down. And I'm gonna cut sort of wide strips of onion so that they sort of maintain their texture. So I'm just gonna do something like this, and then just keep them like this and throw them in at the end. I love adding fresh beans for a Thai curry. They add some nice crunch, some nice color too. So for my green beans, I'm gonna trim the ends. And then I like to keep them kind of long, so couple inches maybe, something like that. You can do a couple at a time. This is smelling really good. It's steaming up my glasses. It's a good sign. It's also just looking really festive. Look how bright orange it's turned with these yellow potatoes and yellow squash. Really cool. So I'm gonna keep cooking these until our potatoes are easily pierced with a fork. So I'll put the top back on, and we're gonna get started with our greens. So the first step is to destem our leafy greens. So you're just gonna kind of start a little tear at the end of the leafy part here, and then just pull straight down. Whoop. Get our stem off. So I'm just gonna destem all of the leaves first, and I'm a really big fan of using these stems to cook with. They're gonna add some really nice crunch, good texture to our curry here. And whenever I cook with leafy greens like kale or Swiss chard or collards, I like to incorporate the stems as well. Got really beautiful rainbow Swiss chard stems too, all the better. And for our leafy greens here, you can use your hands to kind of rip it up into small pieces, or you can line up a few of the leaves and do a chiffonade. So you can layer a few leaves, roll it up, and then you can cut it into ribbons. You can do kind of thick ribbons if you'd like. I wouldn't recommend doing super tiny ones for this recipe like that, because they're kind of gonna get lost in your curry. but you could do like a medium width if you'd like as well. So kind of up to you. I'm just gonna rip today some pieces. Sometimes the ribbons are a little bit hard to eat in a soup, so I prefer to have sort of like pieces, ripped pieces of greens. This was about 12 leaves, but you know, you can add however many you choose for this recipe. If you're not as big of a fan of the leafy greens, don't add them at all, throw in something else. Okay, and then for our stems, I'm just gonna bring a few of them together like this, and I like to slice these into pretty small pieces, and then throw them in at the end, kind of like chopping celery. Okay. Cool. We're done with all of our chopping. Oh, except for one last thing. We're going to slice this lime, and in order to get as much juice out of it as possible, I'd recommend rolling it. You can do this for lemons also. Rolling it on the table a little bit, that's going to soften it, make it easier to juice. And I think I'll use half of this lime as a garnish at the end. So I'm going to cut it into 4 small pieces as a garnish. And then this half of the lime, I'll put the juice into our curry. I've got a piece of potato here that I've taken out, and I'm just going to check to see if it's cooked through. You can use your knife to slice it, or you could use a fork to pierce it and see. I'm just going to give it a taste. It's really hot, and it's soft. It's super creamy. Yum. I'm going to do the same with our winter squash as well. Our winter squash doesn't take quite as long to cook as our potatoes, especially this delicata. So let's see how we're doing. Pretty much there. Wow, really sweet. Yum. Okay. So now that our squash and our potatoes are nicely cooked, just going to turn down our heat a little bit, and I'm going to throw in our green beans. And when you're adding veggies to a boiling pot of liquid like this, like you would for a soup or for hash, make sure that you add them not from up high, but really close to the ingredients of your pot so you don't splash yourself. I'm going to stir those in. And again, this curry is more like a stew, so it's not supposed to be super liquidy, but to have a little bit of broth in there too. And I'm going to add our onions in now. Make sure to kind of pull them apart a little bit, because I like to have those like different onion pieces in there. And I'm going to add the stems of our hardy greens. So colorful. I'm going to stir those in, and I'm going to cook these for maybe 2 minutes, and then I'll add the greens in last because they take the least amount of time to cook. Yum, this is smelling really good. I'm going to add a couple tablespoons of fish sauce now. Again, this is optional. You could also add a couple tablespoons of just granulated sugar to this recipe, or even honey, if you would like as well, just to give it some more depth of flavor. Stir that in. Our green beans are a little bit darker green now, so that means that they're cooking through a little bit. I like to have them have like a little bit of give, a little crunch, so I'm not going to cook them for too long. And then lastly, I'm going to add some lime juice. So I'm going to add lime juice from this half a lime, and then we've got our wedges to garnish too. All right. Stir our lime juice in. This is looking really tasty. And our greens, last but not least. Just throw them all there. Put them on top here. And I'll just stir these beautiful greens in. I really love to eat this curry with rice on the side. I've also had it with rice noodles. So either one of those would be a great choice for a side. And these greens really only take about a minute to cook before you're ready to go. All right, y'all, I think our curry is about ready for serving. Make sure that you taste it to make sure that it's to your liking, that it's got some spice to it, some sweetness. So I'm gonna turn it off. And again, if you made your winter squash bowl, you can just go ahead and use a ladle to put some of your curry in your bowl here. This kabocha squash kind of caved in a little bit, but that's okay. An acorn squash or a carnival squash or any kind of, like even a small pie pumpkin would be great to use as a bowl. And it's just super festive for fall and really fun to eat out of. Get some greens on top there. You could even put the lid back on a little bit just for some presentation there. And there's our Thai curry for fall. All right, it's the moment that we have all been waiting for, all fall long. It's time to try our squash bowl Thai curry soup for fall. I'm just gonna squeeze a little lime on here. All right, let's see. Yum. That is so tasty. It's spicy. It's just got so many flavors different going on. It's warm, so hearty and delicious for this season. I hope that you all enjoy making it.